The Ceci family home stood at the far end of Sycamore Lane in Millfield, Massachusetts. Is a three-story Victorian structure with peeling paint and shutters that hung askew. Most residents of the small New England town gave the property a wide berth, crossing to the opposite side of the street when passing by. The house had been in the family for generations, its reputation growing darker with each passing decade. Eleanor Ceci, a widow in her late 50s, lived there with her three daughters, Abigail, 28, Beatrice, 25, and Catherine, 19. The town knew little about them beyond whispered rumors and occasional sightings at the local market. Eleanor homeschooled all three girls, keeping them isolated from the community. Those who interacted with the family described Eleanor as cold and controlling, her daughters quiet and obedient to a disturbing degree. Mark Davis, the new sheriff of Millfield, had heard the gossip since arriving 6 months prior. Most dismissed the talk as small-town superstition, but something about the Ceci family unsettled him. Their isolation seemed deliberate, almost calculated. On a brisk October morning, Mark received a call from Mrs. Winters, who lived next door to the Cecis. Her voice trembled as she reported hearing screams coming from the house the previous night. "This isn't the first time, Sheriff," she said. But it was different, more desperate. Mark promised to investigate, though he had little legal grounds to enter the property. As he approached the house that afternoon, the air seemed to grow colder. The front yard was immaculately maintained despite the home's general disrepair. Not a leaf or twig out of place. The contrast was jarring. He knocked on the front door, waiting nearly 5 minutes before it creaked open. Eleanor Ceci stood in the doorway, her thin frame draped in a faded black dress, gray hair pulled tight in a severe bun. "Sheriff Davis," she said, her voice soft yet somehow penetrating. "What brings you to our home?" "Good afternoon, Mrs. Ceci. We received a report of disturbances last night. I'm just checking to make sure everything's all right." Eleanor's lips curved into what might have been a smile, though it never reached her eyes. "Everything is fine, Sheriff. My youngest daughter had a nightmare. Nothing more." As she spoke, Mark noticed a figure watching from the stairs behind her, a young woman with pale skin and hollow eyes. Their gazes met briefly before she retreated upstairs. "I'd like to speak with your daughters, if possible," Mark said. "They're indisposed at the moment," Eleanor replied, her tone hardening. "We value our privacy, Sheriff. Unless you have a warrant, I'm afraid I must ask you to leave." As Mark turned to go, he caught a glimpse of something scratched into the doorframe, a small symbol he couldn't identify. The sight of it sent an inexplicable chill down his spine. Walking back to his car, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong in that house. What he didn't know was that his visit had set in motion a sequence of events that would expose the darkest secret of Millfield, a secret the Ceci family had kept buried for generations. Catherine Ceci had been watching from the stairs when the sheriff arrived. At 19, she was the youngest of Eleanor's daughters and the only one who still harbored thoughts of escape. Unlike her sisters, who had long since surrendered to their mother's will, Catherine maintained a fragile hope for a different life. That evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Catherine sat at the kitchen table watching her mother prepare dinner. Eleanor worked methodically, her movements precise as she chopped vegetables for the stew. Abigail and Beatrice set the table in silence, their expressions vacant. "Mother," Catherine ventured. The sheriff seemed concerned. "Perhaps we should." "Enough," Eleanor snapped, the knife pausing mid-chop. "The sheriff is new to town. He doesn't understand our ways. He will learn to leave us alone, as the others did." Catherine lowered her eyes. "Yes, Mother." Later, after her sisters had gone to bed, Catherine crept down to the basement with a flashlight. The space was divided into two sections, the main area where Eleanor stored preserves and housekeeping supplies, and a smaller room behind a heavy oak door, a room Catherine had been forbidden to enter. The key hung on a hook in Eleanor's bedroom, but Catherine had secretly made a wax impression months ago and crafted her own key. Her heart pounded as she slipped it into the lock, turning it slowly to minimize noise. The door swung open to reveal a small room lined with bookshelves. At its center stood an ancient wooden table stained dark with what might have been in core something else. Catherine's flashlight beam revealed dozens of leather-bound volumes, their spines unmarked. She selected one at random, opening it to find pages covered in Eleanor's neat handwriting. The entries dated back 3 years, detailing rituals performed on specific dates. Catherine recognized many as nights when her mother had taken Abigail or Beatrice to the basement, returning hours later looking exhausted but satisfied. Her sisters never spoke of these sessions, and Catherine had been deemed not ready to participate. As she flipped through the journal, a loose page fell out, a letter addressed to Eleanor from Catherine's grandmother, dated 2 months before her death. "My dearest daughter, the time approaches for the final transition. You have learned well, and I am confident you will continue our family's sacred duty. Remember that the power comes with a price. Each generation must sacrifice to maintain what we have built. Your eldest is nearly prepared, but watch the youngest carefully. I sense a resistance in her that must be broken before she can take her place in our line. The bloodline must remain pure. The covenant must be honored. When I am gone, you will understand the full weight of our inheritance." With eternal devotion, Mother Catherine's hand trembled as she read. She had always felt different from her sisters, sensed her grandmother's disapproval. Now she understood why. A floorboard creaked overhead. Catherine quickly returned the journal to its place, slipped out of the room, and locked the door. As she crept back upstairs, questions swirled in her mind. What was the covenant her grandmother mentioned? What sacrifice was required of each generation? She needed to know more, but instinct told her time was running out. Tomorrow would be her 19th birthday, the same age Beatrice had been when the late-night basement sessions began. Mark Davis sat in his office the next morning reviewing old police reports involving the Ceci family. There wasn't much. A few noise complaints over the years, all dismissed without investigation. What troubled him more was what he wasn't finding. No record of the daughters attending school. No medical records. No employment history for the older two who should have been working age. It was as if the daughters barely existed on paper. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Linda Barnes, the town's librarian and longest-serving resident, stood in the doorway. "Sheriff, Maggie at the diner mentioned you visited the Ceci house yesterday," she said, her voice low despite them being alone. "I thought you might want some context." Mark gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please." Linda sat, smoothing her skirt. "The Cecis have been in Millfield for 7 generations. Always women, always strange. Eleanor's mother, Vivian, was just like her, controlled her daughters completely. Before her it was Margaret Ceci, and before that Elizabeth." "What about the fathers?" Mark asked. "That's just it. No one knows. The Ceci women have children, but no one ever sees them with men. Rumors say they find men from out of town, seduce them, and ... double quotes." She trailed off. "Well, the men are never seen again." Mark leaned forward. "You're suggesting they murder these men?" Linda held up her hands. "I'm not suggesting anything, Sheriff. Just telling you what people have whispered for generations. What I do know is that every 19 years, like clockwork, strange things happen in Millfield. Livestock dies inexplicably. Children have nightmares so terrible they wake up screaming for weeks. The river runs cloudy. And when was the last cycle? 19 years ago." Linda's eyes met his. "Right after Catherine was born." Mark sat back, processing this information. "Why hasn't anyone investigated before?" Linda's laugh was hollow. "They have. Sheriff Mills in the 80s, Sheriff Collins before him. They all started asking questions, then suddenly stopped. Became defensive of the family, even. Mills retired early, moved away. Collins had a stroke, never spoke again. You're saying they were what, cursed? Threatened? I'm saying be careful, Sheriff Davis. Millfield protects its own, even the ones we fear. There's a reason that family has remained untouched for generations." After Linda left, Mark called the state police, requesting information on his predecessors. The records confirmed Linda's account. Both men had abruptly ceased investigations into the Ceci family. Mills had indeed retired unexpectedly, selling his house and moving to Florida with no forwarding address. As dusk fell, Mark drove past the Ceci house again. Candles flickered in every window, and he could see shadowy figures moving behind the curtains. Tomorrow, he decided, he would request a welfare check with proper backup. Whatever was happening in that house, he wouldn't let it continue unchallenged. What Mark didn't know was that tomorrow would be too late. Inside the house, Eleanor was already preparing for Catherine's 19th birthday, the day she would finally take her place in the family tradition. Catherine couldn't sleep. Her bedroom on the 3rd floor offered a clear view of Millfield, lights twinkling in the distance like stars fallen to earth. Freedom lay just beyond those lights, yet it might as well have been another universe. Her door opened silently and Beatrice slipped inside. Of her 2 sisters, Beatrice had always been the gentler one, occasionally showing flashes of the person she might have been without Eleanor's influence. "You should be sleeping," Beatrice whispered, sitting on the edge of Catherine's bed. "Tomorrow's important. What happens tomorrow, Beatrice? What did Mother do to you on your 19th birthday?" Beatrice's eyes clouded as if trying to peer through fog. She showed me the truth. Our heritage. Our purpose." Her voice sounded mechanical, rehearsed. "Did it hurt?" Catherine asked. A flash of fear crossed Beatrice's face. So quick, Catherine almost missed it. "The transition is necessary. Mother says pain purifies." "What if I don't want to transition? What if I want to leave?" Beatrice gripped Catherine's wrist, surprisingly strong. "Never say that. You can't leave. None of us can. The covenant binds us all. What covenant? Catherine pressed. Beatrice shook her head. I've said too much. Sleep now. Accept what comes tomorrow. Fighting only makes it worse. She rose and moved to the door, pausing. I do love you, Catherine. Remember that tomorrow. After Beatrice left, Catherine pulled out her small notebook from beneath the mattress. For months she'd been documenting the strange occurrences in the house, the phases of the moon when Eleanor took her sisters to the basement, the strange ingredients delivered in unmarked packages, the symbols etched into door frames. It wasn't much, but if something happened to her, she wanted to leave evidence. Tomorrow, before the transition, she would find a way to get her notes to Sheriff Davis. He seemed different from the others, less willing to look away. Catherine hid the notebook again and finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. She dreamed of her sisters as they once were, Abigail laughing as she pushed Catherine on a swing in the backyard, Beatrice teaching her to braid hair, before they changed, before they became extensions of their mother's will. Morning arrived with heavy fog blanketing Millfield. Catherine woke to find a white dress laid out on her chair similar to the ones her sisters now wore daily. High-necked and modest. A note in Eleanor's handwriting read simply, "Wear this. Come down when ready." Catherine dressed slowly, tucking her notebook into her underwear where the dress's fullness would hide it. She had no plan yet for getting it to the sheriff, but she had to try. Downstairs, the house had been transformed. Candles burned in iron holders, filling the air with an unfamiliar herbal scent. The furniture in the living room had been pushed back, and a circle of salt marked the floor. Eleanor and her sisters waited, their faces solemn. All three wore identical black dresses, a stark contrast to Catherine's white. My youngest daughter, Eleanor said, her voice carrying an unfamiliar warmth. Today you join your sisters in our family's true purpose. Today you learn why the Ceci women have been blessed with power and longevity, beyond ordinary humans. Catherine swallowed hard. And if I refuse? Eleanor's smile didn't falter. You won't. The blood that flows in your veins will call to its source. Fighting your nature only brings suffering. Behind Eleanor, Catherine noticed Abigail's blank stare and Beatrice's slight trembling. Whatever had been done to them, it had broken something essential within them. She would not let that happen to her. Before we begin, Catherine said, "May I use the bathroom? I'm feeling nervous." Eleanor nodded. "Of course, but be quick. The alignment will not wait, in the downstairs bathroom." Catherine quickly removed her notebook and slid it into the small window that faced the side yard. With luck, it would fall into the bushes where someone might find it. It wasn't much, but it was all she could do. When she returned, Eleanor gestured to the circle. "Step inside, daughter. Your new life awaits." With no choice but to obey for now, Catherine entered the circle, the salt crunching beneath her bare feet. As her sisters began to chant in a language she didn't recognize, Catherine silently vowed that whatever happened today, she would not become like them. She would fight. She would escape. And if she couldn't escape, she would find a way to end the Ceci family's covenant once and for all. The basement air hung thick with the scent of burning herbs as Eleanor led Catherine down the narrow stairs. Abigail and Beatrice followed, their chanting never ceasing, their eyes fixed on some middle distance as if seeing beyond the physical world. The main basement looked transformed. Black fabric draped the walls, and dozens of candles created dancing shadows. Eleanor unlocked the door to the forbidden room, which now contained only the ancient table, cleared of books and journals. On its surface lay a silver knife, a chalice, and a leather-bound volume Catherine hadn't seen before, much older than the journals she'd discovered, its cover worn smooth by generations of hands. "Our family's grimoire," Eleanor explained, noticing Catherine's gaze. "Begun by Prudence Ceci in 1693, after she escaped the Salem trials. She discovered that true power comes not from communing with the devil, as her accusers claimed, but from something far older." Eleanor opened the book to reveal pages of faded script, diagrams, and what appeared to be bloodstains. "Every Ceci woman has added her knowledge. Tonight you will read from it, and your name will be added to our lineage. And if I refuse?" Catherine asked again, searching for any sign of hesitation in her mother's face. "The covenant doesn't recognize refusal," Eleanor replied coldly. "Only completion or death. Your sisters understood this." Catherine glanced at Abigail and Beatrice, still chanting by the door. "What did you do to them?" "I opened their minds to our legacy." Abigail embraced it willingly. Beatrice fought. "Like you're fighting now." Eleanor stroked Catherine's cheek. "She suffered unnecessarily. Don't make her mistake." "What is this covenant?" Catherine pressed. "Who did Prudence make it with?" Eleanor smiled, pride gleaming in her eyes. "Not who, my dear. What? Something that has existed in the dark places of this land since before humans arrived. Something that offers power in exchange for service and sacrifice. Every 19 years it requires renewal. Tonight marks the 19th anniversary of your birth and of the last renewal. The implication struck Catherine like a physical blow. My father... Was he the sacrifice? Men are vessels, nothing more, Eleanor said dismissively. They provide what we need to continue our line, then serve their final purpose. Catherine's mind raced. The gaps in her mother's explanations suggested Eleanor herself didn't fully understand the entity they served. She only knew the rituals passed down through generations. It's time, Eleanor announced as the grandfather clock upstairs chimed midnight. She motioned for Catherine to lie on the table. When Catherine hesitated, Abigail and Beatrice broke their chant to move forward, their expressions unchanged as they gripped Catherine's arms, forcing her onto the hard surface. "Don't fight," Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible. "It will be over soon." Eleanor picked up the knife, its blade catching the candlelight. "A small sacrifice of your blood will seal your commitment. Then you'll speak the words, and your mind will open to the knowledge that has sustained our family for centuries." As Eleanor brought the knife toward her palm, Catherine suddenly twisted, breaking free from her sister's grip. She rolled off the table, knocking the grimoire to the floor. "Restrain her," Eleanor commanded, but Catherine was already moving, grabbing one of the iron candle holders and swinging it in a wide arc. Her sisters backed away, their synchronicity broken by surprise. "You'll complete the ritual," Eleanor hissed, advancing with the knife. "One way or another." Catherine continued, backing toward the door. "What happens if the covenant isn't renewed? What happens to you, Mother?" A flash of fear crossed Eleanor's face, the first genuine emotion Catherine had seen from her in years. "Without renewal, the gifts we've received begin to fade. Then the hunger begins. The one who failed in her duty suffers most of all." "Is that why you're so desperate?" Catherine asked. "Are you already feeling it?" Eleanor lunged forward, but age had slowed her reflexes. Catherine dodged, then sprinted for the stairs, taking them two at a time. Behind her, she heard Eleanor screaming commands and her sister's footsteps in pursuit. Reaching the main floor, Catherine ran for the front door, only to find it locked with a key she didn't have. She veered toward the kitchen instead, looking for another way out as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Sheriff Mark Davis couldn't sleep. The Ceci house dominated his thoughts, its secrets like a splinter in his mind. Around midnight, he decided to drive past the property again before heading home. As he approached Sycamore Lane, he noticed the house was dark except for a faint glow from the basement windows. He parked a short distance away, debating whether to approach. Without probable cause or a warrant, he had no legal right to enter. His radio crackled. "Sheriff, we've got reports of screaming from the Ceci residence," the dispatcher said. Mrs. Winters called it in again. "I'm already here," Mark replied. "Send backup." That was all he needed. With a disturbance complaint, he could approach the house to investigate. As he walked toward the property, a crash of breaking glass shattered the night's stillness. A window on the ground floor had burst outward and a figure tumbled through it, landing roughly on the lawn. Mark ran forward as the figure, a young woman in a white dress now stained with blood, struggled to her feet. She spotted him and rushed in his direction. "Help me," she gasped, reaching him. "Please, you have to help me." "Catherine?" Mark recognized the youngest Ceci daughter from his brief glimpse the day before. "What's happening?" "My mother, the ritual." She glanced back at the house. "There's no time. We need to leave now." The front door of the house flew open and Eleanor Ceci stood framed in the doorway, her daughters flanking her. In her hand she held what appeared to be a silver knife. "Sheriff Davis," Eleanor called, her voice unnaturally calm. "My daughter's having an episode. She needs medical attention, which we can provide at home." "She's bleeding," Mark replied, positioning himself between Catherine and her family. "I'm taking her to the hospital." Eleanor took a step forward. "This is a family matter. You have no authority here." Mark unsnapped his holster, resting his hand on his gun. "Ma'am, I'm responding to a disturbance call. Your daughter is injured and asking for help. Step back into the house now." For a moment, Eleanor seemed ready to advance despite the warning. Then, surprising everyone, Beatrice spoke. "Mother," she said, her voice stronger than Catherine had heard it in years, "the time is wrong. The alignment has passed." Eleanor turned on her middle daughter, rage distorting her features. "Silence. The ritual can still be completed." "No," Beatrice insisted, something shifting in her vacant expression. "It's too late for tonight. The window is closed." Eleanor slapped Beatrice hard across the face, the sound cracking through the night air. You too? After everything I've sacrificed? Mark drew his weapon now. Mrs. Ceci stepped back and put down the knife. Everyone stay where you are. Backup is on its way. As if on cue, sirens sounded in the distance. Eleanor's face contorted with fury, but she lowered the knife. This isn't over, she said, looking directly at Catherine. The Covenant doesn't release what belongs to it. She retreated into the house, pulling Abigail with her. Beatrice hesitated, meeting Catherine's eyes briefly before following them inside. The door slammed shut with such force that dust billowed from the frame. Mark led Catherine to his car just as 2 patrol cars arrived. Get her to the hospital, he instructed one of his deputies. Stay with her. No one sees her without my approval. What about the house? Another deputy asked. We secured until I can get a warrant, Mark replied. No one goes in, no one comes out. As Catherine was helped into the patrol car, she grabbed Mark's arm. My notebook. I hid it by the side window in the bushes. It explains everything. And there's a room in the basement, behind a locked door. You need to see what's inside. Mark nodded. I'll find it. You're safe now. As the patrol car pulled away, Mark turned back to the Ceci house. The curtains were drawn, but he could sense movement inside. He'd need that warrant quickly. He had a feeling Eleanor wouldn't wait long to eliminate evidence. What he didn't realize was that the danger extended far beyond Eleanor herself. The Covenant she served had sustained the Ceci women for generations, and it would not surrender its hold easily. The failed ritual had consequences that would soon ripple through Millfield in ways none of them could imagine. The hospital room felt sterile and bright after the candlelit darkness of the Ceci house. Catherine sat on the examination table while a doctor cleaned and bandaged the cuts on her arms and face from the broken window. Deputy Wilson stood guard outside her door, as instructed by Sheriff Davis. You're lucky, the doctor said, finishing the last bandage. No stitches needed. Just some rest, and these should heal cleanly. Catherine nodded absently, her mind still processing her narrow escape. After the doctor left, a nurse brought her clean, clothes generic hospital sweats to replace her blood-stained white dress, now bagged as evidence. Once changed, Catherine sat by the window, watching dawn break over Millfield. She'd never been to the hospital before. Eleanor had always treated the family's illnesses at home with herbal remedies and strange poultices that seemed to work despite their odd ingredients. A knock at the door preceded Sheriff Davis's entrance. He carried a plastic evidence bag containing her notebook and a clipboard with official forms. Found this where you said it would be, he said, placing the notebook on the bedside table. I've read through it. Combined with what I saw tonight, it's enough for a judge to grant us a search warrant for the house. My sisters, Catherine said, will they be arrested too? Mark sat in the chair across from her. That depends on their involvement and mental state. From what you've described, they may be victims as much as accomplices. They are, Catherine insisted, especially Beatrice. You saw her tonight. She tried to help in her way. Mother did something to them, changed them somehow. They weren't always like this. The district attorney will take that into consideration, Mark assured her. Right now, I need your official statement about what happened tonight, and anything else you can tell me about what goes on in that house. Catherine spent the next hour detailing her family's strange practices. The basement room, the grimoire, and the covenant her mother had mentioned. She described the ritual preparations and how her sisters had changed after their 19th birthdays. She said something about a sacrifice every 19 years, Catherine explained. I think my father was the last one, and my sister's fathers before that. Mark's expression darkened. If there's evidence of murder, this case gets a lot more serious. You won't find bodies, Catherine said. Mother said something once about returning them to the earth. I think she may have dissolved them somehow. In the woods behind our property, there's a section where nothing grows. We were never allowed near it. Mark made a note. We'll search there too. For now, you're being placed in protective custody. We've arranged a safe house outside of town where you'll stay with a female officer until this is, solved. What about tonight? Catherine asked, sudden panic in her voice. It's still my birthday. If Mother can't complete the ritual with me, she might try with someone else. The house is under surveillance, Mark assured her. No one's getting in or out without us knowing. Catherine wasn't comforted. You don't understand. It's not just about the ritual. If it isn't completed, something happens to them. Mother was afraid. I've never seen her afraid before. Before Mark could respond, his radio crackled. Sheriff, we've got a situation at the Ceci house. You need to get over here. On my way, he replied, standing. Sit tight. Deputy Wilson will stay with you. I'll be back as soon as I can. As he left, Catherine turned back to the window. The morning sky had darkened again, heavy clouds rolling in from the direction of her home. A sense of dread settled over her. Whatever was happening had only just begun. Sheriff Davis arrived at the Ceci house to find his deputies maintaining a perimeter around the property. The search warrant had come through, authorizing them to enter and investigate based on Catherine's testimony and the events of the previous night. "What's the situation?" Mark asked the deputy in charge. "No movement inside since dawn," the officer reported. "But something strange is happening to the house itself. Look at the walls." Mark followed his gesture and saw what appeared to be a dark liquid seeping through the exterior paint, a viscous substance that resembled oil but moved against gravity, crawling upward from the foundation. "Anyone try to make contact?" Mark asked. "We knocked and announced our presence with the warrant. No response." Mark nodded. "All right, we go in. Full protective gear. Nobody touches anything barehanded. We're looking for evidence of illegal activity, specifically in the basement area described by Catherine Ceci." The entry team approached the front door, which swung open at their touch despite supposedly being locked. The interior was dim, curtains drawn against the morning light. The living room showed signs of the interrupted ritual, the salt circle, candles burned down to stubs, the furniture pushed to the walls. "Clear the ground floor and second level," Mark ordered. "I'll take the basement with Miller and Johnson." The stairs to the basement creaked under their weight. At the bottom, they found the transformed space Catherine had described, black fabric on the walls. Dozens of extinguished candles, the lingering scent of unfamiliar herbs. The door to the inner room stood ajar. Mark pushed it open to reveal the ancient table Catherine had mentioned. The silver knife lay on the floor, and dark stains marked the wood surface. The grimoire was gone. "Check for hidden spaces," Mark instructed. "If there's evidence of murder, there might be remains somewhere." As his officers examined the walls for hidden compartments, Mark noticed something odd about the floor beneath the table. The stone appeared newer than the surrounding area. He moved the table aside to reveal what looked like a trapdoor set into the floor. "I've got something here," he called. His officers helped him lift the heavy stone slab, revealing a narrow set of stairs descending into darkness. "Get more lights," Mark ordered. One of the officers returned with powerful flashlights, and the three men began their descent. The air grew colder as they moved deeper underground. The stairs ended in a small chamber hewn from the earth itself. Unlike the carefully maintained spaces above, this room felt ancient and untouched for centuries. Symbols were carved into the walls similar to the one Mark had noticed on the shaky doorframe, but more elaborate. In the center of the room stood a stone altar, its surface concave and stained dark. Behind it, a narrow fissure in the rock wall emitted a faint, pulsing glow. "What the hell is this place?" Officer Johnson whispered. Before Mark could answer, a scream echoed from upstairs, followed by the sound of gunfire. Mark grabbed his radio. "Report. What's happening up there?" Static answered him. Then a panicked voice broke through. "Sir, they're changing. The women, there." The transmission cut off with another scream. "Let's move," Mark ordered, leading his officers back toward the stairs. As they ascended, the temperature dropped further, their breath fogging in the air despite it being early October. They emerged into the basement to find it empty, the door to the main floor closed. Mark tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Break it down," he commanded. Three men took turns ramming the door with their shoulders until it finally splintered open. The scene that greeted them in the kitchen froze them in place. One of Mark's deputies lay on the floor, his service weapon still in his hand, his eyes open and vacant. His skin had a gray cast, as if all blood had been drained from his body. Of Eleanor and her daughters, there was no sign. But the dark substance Mark had noticed on the exterior walls was now visible inside as well, pulsing along the baseboards and ceiling in rhythmic waves, as if the house itself had developed a circulatory system. "We need to get out now," Mark said, his instincts screaming danger. "Everyone out of the house." And they made their way through the ground floor, finding two more deputies in similar states, drained, lifeless. Their weapons fired, but apparently ineffective against whatever had attacked them. As they reached the front door, it slammed shut on its own. The windows darkened as the viscous substance covered them, blocking the outside light. The house was sealing itself. "Alternative exits," Mark ordered, fighting to maintain his composure. "Kitchen door, windows, anything." They split up, searching for a way out as the darkness in the house deepened. Mark headed for the kitchen, hoping to find the rear exit clear. Instead, he found Eleanor Ceci standing before it, though she barely resembled the woman he'd confronted the night before. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor similar to the dead deputies, but unlike them, she moved with fluid grace. Her eyes had darkened completely, becoming pools of the same viscous substance that coursed through the house. "Sheriff Davis," she said, her voice layered with another, deeper tone beneath her own. "You should not have interfered in family matters." Mark drew his weapon. Mrs. Ceci, you're under arrest for the murder of police officers and suspicion of numerous other crimes. Eleanor laughed, the sound echoing strangely. The Covenant protects its own, Sheriff. Your predecessors learned this. Now you will too. She stepped toward him and Mark fired, the shots echoing in the enclosed space. The bullets struck Eleanor but seemed to pass through her without effect, the wounds closing instantly with more of the dark substance. Mark backed away, realizing too late that conventional weapons would have no effect against. Whatever Eleanor had become, more perhaps had always been beneath her human facade. His radio crackled to life. Sheriff, it was Officer Miller. I found a way out through an upstairs window. The substance is thinner there. On my way, Mark replied, turning to run. Behind him, Eleanor made no move to pursue, her laughter following him up the stairs. What Mark didn't know was that Eleanor had no need to chase him. The Covenant that had sustained generations of Ceci women was waking fully for the first time in centuries, roused by the interrupted ritual, and it was hungry. Catherine paced her hospital room, anxiety building with each passing hour. Deputy Wilson had stepped outside to take a call, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The cloud she'd noticed earlier now blanketed Millfield completely, casting an unnatural darkness over the morning. Her phone buzzed, a prepaid one Mark had given her for emergencies. The message was from an unknown number. It's Beatrice. Mother is changing. You need to run. Get out of Millfield. Catherine stared at the screen, her heart racing. Before she could reply, the lights in her room flickered and died, plunging her into semi-darkness. The backup generators kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in a dim, reddish emergency light. Deputy Wilson burst back into the room. We need to move you now, she said, urgency in her voice. Something's happening at your house. We've lost contact with the sheriff and his team. My sister just texted me, Catherine said, showing her the phone. She says my mother is changing. The deputy's expression hardened. All the more reason to get you somewhere safe. Come on. They moved quickly through the hospital corridors, where staff were rushing to check on patients during the power fluctuation. Outside, the sky had darkened to an unnatural twilight despite it being mid-morning. As they reached the deputy's car, Catherine felt a familiar sensation, the same heaviness in the air she'd experienced during her mother's rituals. It's here, she whispered. Whatever my mother serves, it's reaching out. We just need to get clear of the town, the deputy assured her, starting the engine. The safe house is 30 miles away. We'll be there in 20 minutes. They pulled out of the hospital parking lot onto empty streets. The few pedestrians visible were hurrying indoors, seeking shelter from what they likely perceived as an approaching storm. As they neared the town limits, Catherine noticed dark streaks appearing on buildings they passed, the same viscous substance she'd sometimes glimpsed in the basement at home. It crawled along walls and pavement, following their car. Drive faster, Catherine urged. The deputy complied, pressing the accelerator as they approached the leaving Millfield sign. Just as they were about to pass it, a figure appeared in the road ahead, Abigail, Catherine's eldest sister, standing perfectly still amid the gathering darkness. The deputy swerved to avoid her, but Abigail didn't flinch or move. Don't stop, Catherine warned as the deputy slowed instinctively. That's not really my sister anymore. Through the rearview mirror, Catherine watched Abigail turn to follow their car with empty eyes, her movements unnaturally fluid. Then, impossibly, she began to run after them, moving faster than any human should. The deputy floored the accelerator, putting distance between them and the pursuing figure. What the hell was that? She gasped. The Covenant, Catherine said quietly. My mother failed to complete the renewal ritual with me. Now it's taking what it's owed another way. They drove in tense silence for several miles, the dark clouds seeming to follow their car. Just as Catherine began to hope they might escape, the engine sputtered and died, leaving them stranded on the empty country road. This isn't possible, the deputy muttered, trying the ignition repeatedly. The car was just serviced. Catherine looked out the windows, seeing the familiar dark substance seeping up from the ground around their tires. It doesn't want me to leave. The deputy drew her weapon. Stay in the car. I'll check outside. No, don't, Catherine began, but the deputy was already opening her door. She stepped out, gun raised, scanning their surroundings. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the asphalt beneath her feet seemed to liquefy, the dark substance surging upward to envelop her legs. The deputy fired into the ground, the shots having no effect as the substance climbed higher, pulling her down. Her screams were abruptly cut off as the darkness covered her completely, leaving no trace except her gun lying on the now solid road. Catherine scrambled into the driver's seat, trying the ignition herself with the same result. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to think. If she couldn't escape Millfield, she needed to stop whatever was happening at its source. Her mother had mentioned that the covenant required renewal through the ritual. Without it, the gifts they'd received would fade, replaced by hunger. But what if there was no one left to perform the ritual at all? What would happen to the covenant then? Catherine made her decision. If she couldn't escape the covenant, perhaps she could end it. She began walking back toward Millfield, toward her home, where everything had begun. She didn't notice the figure watching from the trees, Beatrice. Her eyes clear for the first time in years, silently following her youngest sister's return. Sheriff Mark Davis and Officer Miller huddled in an upstairs bedroom of the Ceci house, the door barricaded with furniture. They'd managed to escape Eleanor's immediate presence, but the house itself had become their prison. Every exit was sealed by the pulsating dark substance, which seemed to be gradually consuming the structure from the inside out. "What the hell is happening?" Miller whispered, his face pale with shock. "This isn't possible." "I don't know," Mark admitted. "But it's connected to what Catherine told me. This covenant her family serves. Whatever it is, it's awakening." Their radios had stopped working completely. Through the window they could see that the unnatural darkness had spread beyond the house, engulfing much of Millfield. Occasionally they heard screams in the distance. "We need to get back to that room in the basement," Mark said finally. "The altar, the fissure in the wall, that's the source. Maybe there's a way to stop this there." "And how do we get past Mrs. Ceci and whatever she's become?" Miller asked. Before Mark could answer, a sound at the window drew their attention. Someone was tapping on the glass from outside. Cautiously, Mark approached to find Catherine Ceci perched on the roof edge, gesturing for him to open the window. He pushed against it, finding it sealed like the others. Catherine pointed to his gun, then at the glass. Understanding, Mark used his weapons but to break the window, carefully clearing the shards. "How did you get here?" he asked as he helped her climb inside. "You were supposed to be at the safe house." "It wouldn't let me leave," Catherine explained quickly. The covenant has awakened fully now that the ritual failed. It's claiming Millfield as its feeding ground." "Feeding on what?" Miller asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "Life," Catherine said simply. "It's been sustained by my family's sacrifices for generations. Now it wants more." Mark described what they'd found in the basement, the hidden chamber, the altar, the glowing fissure. "Is that where this thing comes from?" Catherine nodded. "The grimoire mentioned a gateway beneath our house. Prudence Ceci found it when she fled here after Salem. Instead of fighting what came through, she made a deal with irregular sacrifices in exchange for power and long life for the Ceci women." "And now?" Mark pressed. "Now it's free," Catherine said. "Mother's transformation means she's become a vessel for it. My sisters too, probably. They'll help it feed on Millfield until there's nothing left." "How do we stop it?" Catherine hesitated. "The grimoire mentioned that the covenant requires a living Ceci woman to maintain the gateway. If there are no more Ceci women, the implication hung heavily in the air. "There must be another way," Mark insisted. "Maybe," Catherine admitted. "But we need to get to the basement chamber. That's where the original covenant was made. Might be the only place it can be broken." A crash from below interrupted them. Someone was breaking through their barricade. Seconds later, the bedroom door splintered open to reveal Abigail, her appearance now similar to Eleanor's skin gray. Eyes filled with darkness, movements fluid and wrong. "Little sister," she said, her voice layered with that same otherworldly tone. "Mother is waiting for you." Mark raised his gun, but Catherine put a hand on his arm. "It won't work. She's not human anymore." Instead, Catherine stepped forward. "I'll come with you, Abigail. Take me to Mother." Abigail smiled, revealing teeth that had sharpened to points. "So reasonable now. You should have accepted your birthright willingly." She turned and headed downstairs, clearly expecting them to follow. Catherine looked back at Mark and Miller. "Stay close," she whispered. "When we reach the basement, be ready to move quickly." They followed Abigail down to the main floor, where Eleanor waited in what had once been the living room. The furniture was gone now, the floors and walls completely covered in the pulsating dark substance. Eleanor stood at the center, barely recognizable as the woman she had been. "My daughter returns," she said, her voice resonating strangely in the transformed space. "Have you reconsidered your place in our family's legacy?" "Yes, Mother," Catherine replied, her face betraying no emotion. "I understand now." "The ritual must be completed." Eleanor's inhuman eyes studied her suspiciously. "You fought so hard to escape it. What changed your mind?" "I saw what happens when the covenant is denied," Catherine said. "I don't want Millfield to suffer." A smile twisted Eleanor's features. "How noble." "Very well. The time for the ritual has passed, but the covenant will accept your submission." She gestured toward the basement door, which opened on its own. "After you, daughter." Catherine led the way, followed by Eleanor and Abigail, with Mark and Miller bringing up the rear. The basement had changed even more dramatically than the main floor. The walls were entirely gone, replaced by what appeared to be living tissue that pulsed with an internal rhythm. The door to the inner chamber stood open, revealing the stone staircase leading downward. As they descended into the ancient space, Catherine noticed Beatrice standing silently by the altar. Her transformation not as complete as her mother's and sister's. Her eyes still held traces of humanity. The fissure behind the altar had widened, the glow brighter now, illuminating the chamber with pulsing, eldritch light. The grimoire lay open on the altar's surface. "Place your hands on the altar," Eleanor instructed Catherine. "Recite the words on the page. Give yourself to the covenant, and it will spare what remains of Millfield." Catherine approached slowly, aware of Mark and Miller positioning themselves near the stairs. She placed her hands on the altar's cold stone, feeling it pulse beneath her touch like a living heart. "Read," Eleanor commanded. Catherine began reciting the Latin words on the page, her voice steady. As she spoke, the light from the fissure intensified, tendrils of darkness reaching out toward her. Eleanor's expression shifted to triumphant, till Catherine deliberately changed the final phrase, substituting words of her own. The reaction was immediate. The chamber shuddered, the light from the fissure flickering erratically. Eleanor shrieked in rage, lunging toward Catherine. "Now!" Catherine shouted. Mark and Miller surged forward, not toward Eleanor but toward the altar itself. Following Catherine's earlier instructions, they toppled it toward the fissure, sending the grimoire tumbling into the glowing crack in reality. The effect was catastrophic. The light turned blindingly bright, then imploded into darkness. The chamber began to collapse as the fissure widened, hungrily drawing in everything around it. The stairs. Catherine yelled over the deafening roar. "Run!" They scrambled toward the exit as chunks of stone fell from the ceiling. Eleanor and Abigail shrieked in unison, their bodies beginning to dissolve as the covenant reclaimed what it had given them. Beatrice stood motionless by the widening fissure, watching it consume her mother and sister. When Catherine grabbed her arm, trying to pull her toward the stairs, she shook her head. "I can't leave," Beatrice said, her voice her own again. "I'm part of it now, but you're free." She pressed something into Catherine's hand, a small key on a silver chain. "Mother's grimoire wasn't the first. There's another, hidden where no Ceci woman has ever looked. Find it." Before Catherine could respond, the floor between them cracked open. Mark pulled her back toward the stairs as Beatrice was swallowed by the collapsing chamber. They barely made it up the stairs and through the house as it disintegrated around them. The front door, sealed earlier, now hung open to the night air. They stumbled out onto the lawn as the Ceci house folded in on itself, the structure twisting impossibly before vanishing into a point of darkness that winked out of existence. Where the house had stood for over 3 centuries, nothing remained but an empty foundation filled with ordinary debris. The unnatural darkness lifted from Millfield as suddenly as it had appeared. Stars shone overhead, and lights flickered back on throughout the town. Catherine stood silently, the key clutched in her hand, the last of the Ceci line. Whatever her ancestors had awakened beneath their home had been temporarily banished, but Beatrice's final words suggested their family's dark legacy might not be entirely finished. "It's over," Mark said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Catherine nodded, but didn't correct him. She suspected the covenant, like the Ceci women themselves, had merely adapted to survive. Somewhere, perhaps, another branch of her family continued the traditions Prudence had begun. The key felt warm against her palm, a beginning rather than an end. Whatever secrets it unlocked, Catherine would face them on her own terms, not as a servant to ancient darkness, but as its adversary. For now, though, Millfield was safe. The horrible story of the Ceci family had reached its conclusion. The family sin would not be repeated, at least, not by her.